KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
Welcome to another edition of the Central Valley Ledger. We are recording out of the beautiful downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative, Fresno and Clovis. And for those of you who don't know where the studios are, this place used to be the Met Museum, and there used to be a dinosaur, a Tyrannosaurus Rex actually, where I'm sitting, and where our guest is sitting this fine time, Miss Jeannine Raymond. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So before we get to a little bit about the area you live in, let's talk a little bit about yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Oh, I'm a native Californian. I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles and about 40 years ago moved to Fresno to take a job at Fresno State. And I stayed there for about 25 years, wore different hats, and probably the one thing I got involved in that was a harbinger of what I'm doing now is organizing and leading an effort to put a statue of a woman in the campus Peace Garden, Jane Addams. And then about 13 years ago, I left Fresno State and took a job at Berkeley, where I was for 10 years, and got into a couple more activities that were community involvement, group activities. But in 2017, I hung up my academic robes and just took a giant leap into the unknown. So here I am.
Welcome back to the area. So you're originally from Southern California. What part?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Chatsworth, Canoga Park.
So I grew up in Glendale, so we were, or not, I was born in Glendale, raised in Fresno, so we weren't too far from each other out there. You went to Berkeley and then you came back. You know, you could have gone anywhere after Berkeley. Mm-hmm. You decided to come to Fresno. Why?
Actually, I never left Fresno.
Oh, so you were here the whole time.
I commuted weekly on the train between Berkeley and Fresno. You know, initially, living in the Bay Area, working at Berkeley, it sounds great. It was great. It was a phenomenal place to work, and the people there I love. But I really love Fresno. Both my husband and I like Fresno. So every week, Friday, I'd come back on the train. Sunday, I'd leave to go up there on the train. But once you get to know all the conductors and you jump in the taxi at the train station and you don't even have to give them your address, they know where to take you. You've been doing it long enough.
So now you're in Fresno. Mm-hmm. You never left. We talked about that, but you're done with teaching, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So there's a book somewhere in your future, or actually now?
Now, I am so excited. So as I sit here right now, I am waiting for the test copy to arrive at my doorstep.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this has been a long trail. I actually started when I left Berkeley in 2017. I knew that the one project I wanted to dig into was one that had been sitting on my desk for about 20 years, and that was digging at the history of this extraordinary residential area that I happen to live in, but also the woman who created it. And I knew while I was working I wouldn't have the time to do that. So yeah, I wrote it, and then I had to find a publisher for it. That's an experience in itself. So it should be out sometime soon.
Good luck with that. We wish you the best. And when it comes out, I want to invite you back and maybe have you read a little bit from it.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to do that.
So, Wilson Historical District, Wilson Island Historical District.
Yeah.
It's a part of town, an old part of town, right across from Fresno High School.
Yeah.
I'll let you tell the specifics. What area are we talking about?
We're talking about the heart of the Tower District. Most people know where the Tower Theater is, that iconic tower with the ball on top. So the Wilson Island is part of a subdivision that went from Olive to McKinley, And if you know the streets, from Echo over to, but not including Wishon. So it's basically one street, the top of it is one street south of Fresno High.
And how many streets total are we talking, 3 or 4?
Yeah, it's about 2 blocks by 4 blocks. So yeah, Carmen, Home, Pine, Floridora, Echo, Linden, yeah.
I've been by that area, beautiful homes. Tell us a little bit about the history of that area, because there's history tied to this place.
There is a lot of Fresno history tied to this place. So, yeah. So where do I start? We have limited time.
We have a lot of time. So just start.
Stream of consciousness here. No, I'll start in 1908 when Rosanna Josefa Cooper Wilson filed the subdivision map. She owned a 400-acre ranch that was basically between Olive and McKinley and Palm and Wishon. This was her first subdivision. It was, at the time, Fresno was experiencing a population boom. The city leaders were worried because people were leaving due to the lack of housing. And Rosanna and her husband both were committed to providing residential neighborhoods. I'm sure there was some entrepreneurial spirit in there. She came from landowners, and we can talk about that if you want to. But anyway, 1908 she filed it, but they had other things going on. They owned a banana plantation in Mexico.
Wow.
And that was happening about that time. Rosanna had purchased a lot in Santa Cruz.
Wow. So I hate to interrupt you, but you're talking about an individual that was really active in buying and farming and all that stuff.
Not so much farming, though they did have a vineyard. But I'm digressing actually from the history of the Wilson Island. So she filed this subdivision map. Building really didn't take off for a while. World War I got in the way. So 1918, she and her son built one house. And that kind of reinvigorated the interest. And 1919, building took off. So that's why 1919 was nailed as the kind of the beginning of the Wilson Island. That year, about a third of the homes were built.
A third of the homes. So she owned 400 acres at the time. And it's tough for us to say or see that that was all farmland before. Now you look at it, that 400 acres is probably all houses and some schools and commercial in there.
Yeah, so it wasn't even farmland. You have to imagine an era where all the activity was downtown, and downtown was a very constricted area. It was J Street, which is Fulton, Tulare. The courthouse was the center of activity. The courthouse faced the railroad tracks. That was it. When you got 2 miles north, which is about Olive Avenue, you were out in the hinterlands. So it was plains. It was vast sand dunes. And for her to buy that land, she had to be anticipating some northern movement of the city. And there were other things happening around it too, in the 20s.
So what was the oldest house, do you know, in the Wilson Island Historical District?
Yeah, that's the Mosgrove House, 1910. William Mosgrove was a realtor. It's at the corner, it's at 660 Pine, so it's the corner of Pine and Linden on the southwest corner. It's very different, very distinctive. So Mosgrove bought the lot and built the house in 1910. There were about a dozen other houses that over the course of World War I were built. Mosgrove and his realtor partner actually bought 2 more lots in 1919 when that boom began. So Yeah, that one on the corner is the oldest.
And then we know of Shaver Lake, but there is a Shaver connection in the Wilson Island Historical District. Talk about that a little bit.
There is. Lena A. Shaver, built a home on Echo. She was the widow of Charles Shaver, and the home was right next door to the home that Rosanna and her son built. Rosanna never lived there, but it remained in her family for several decades. So imagine if you've ever driven on Echo and you come to Floridora and there's kind of a jog in the road, a very slight jog in the road there. The first big house, Rosanna's house. The second big house, Lena Shaver's house. Virtually nothing between there and Fresno High. There were a couple houses, but nothing for another 10 years. But Lena knew other folks in the neighborhood, and that's one of the fun things to explore in that era.
There were some popular people, some business people. There were some well-off people that were living in the area at the time.
Yeah, so think of the Wilson Island as Fresno's Nob Hill of the 1920s. There actually was a part of town called Nob Hill in the late 1800s. It was at Van Ness and Tulare. So again, imagine the city as a pretty constricted area right around City Hall. So a couple streets over and a couple blocks down south toward Tulare, that was Nob Hill. Well, the city grew. So the millionaires had to find someplace else to go. And, oh, here's this new area up here. And Rosanna made it very appealing for them. So we have people like Henry Gundelfinger, Bank of Central California, built his house on Floridora. Frank Bradford, very interesting story. Frank was from Los Angeles. He established the San Joaquin Baking Company. He came to Fresno because wheat was grown around Fresno. The San Joaquin Baking Company supplied bread from Sacramento to Tehachapi and from the coastal range to the foothills. He had the valley covered. William Eilert, the house that I live in, he and his father started the Fresno Brewing Company in 1900, the foot of M Street. In fact, that building is also on the Historic Register. Ranchers, the Blasingame family, two of the Blasingame sons built probably townhouses in the Wilson Island. One of them, the younger one, William, when his kids got to be about high school age or getting up to high school age, Fresno High was being built, and he built a home on Carmen just a street away, stayed there until the kids finished school, and then was back out on the ranch. And that aura of the Wilson Island, the place where millionaires built their homes, millionaires of the 20s built their homes, that lasted through the Depression. I mean, you've got Henry Korn, the CEO of Gottschalk's.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that one, so that's interesting.
And Richard Felchlin, the architect engineer who built the Security Pacific Bank building downtown, 1930s, depth of depression, and they're building their homes.
So it must be a sense of, I don't know if it's pride, but like I get this feeling in talking to you and looking at the neighborhood that people are really excited and proud to live in that area. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes, I think they're excited to have, to be in a home that has a fun history, to be able to see up close and personal how people lived, especially affluent people lived in the 19-teens and 20s and into the 30s. I mean, we're talking about homes that were built when people had servants. So I'll just use my home as an example. This is a 4,000 square foot home that was built for 2 people. The front part of it is where the homeowner lived, and the back part of it was for the servants.
That's so interesting that you're actually living in history.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, a lot of people feel obligated to help preserve that history. When we became an historic district, there are restrictions on what you can do to the facade of the home. You have to maintain the historical integrity of the facade, which is kind of nice now. You can walk the streets of that Wilson Island, and what you're seeing is what existed in the 1920s. But we also have the benefit of older, what do they call them? The codes that you have to observe.
Yeah, municipal code type thing.
Yeah, we have some flexibility so that we don't damage the historical integrity, yet we maintain them.
So what's the purpose of the committee? So there is this Wilson Island Historical District Committee, or Centennial Committee. What's going on with that? Can you share with our audience?
Sure. We're kind of a loose confederacy. So this came about a little over a year ago now. We started in early 2018, and I reached out to people in the neighborhood with the help of some others, and got a real good cross section of people from across the streets. We have a cross section of generations and interests, and for a year we worked on putting together activities and events for 2019 that would help focus attention on the Wilson Island and the value of the historic district.
So tell us a little bit about when this is, and I mean, are you doing things that are open to the public?
Oh, we are. In May, we have an event that will be at Fresno High, co-sponsored with the Fresno Historical Society. And that one, it's from 10 to noon. It's me talking about the social history of the Wilson Island, and then Karana Hattersley-Drayton, who's the architecture expert, will talk about the architecture of the homes, and there'll be a self-guided tour after that.
So interesting. Tell us a little bit about, not who, but there are some parts of town, like, and I mentioned Lowell, that 10, 20 years ago, people would say, oh, it's not a very good area, but we're seeing a mix of interest in that area. Young families are moving in, as well as retired folks. Tell us a little bit about the Wilson Island Historical District. Do you have that mix in there as well? Are people interested in buying and living in there?
So we do. There's 2 questions there. Yes, they're interested in buying and living, and yes, we have an influx of young families with kids. In fact, some of us were remarking at the last block party last year that we have more kids, little kids in the neighborhood now than we have in the past. There's a bunch of us whose kids grew up in the Wilson Island, and they're off being adults and doing their own thing, and now we have an influx of young families, which is wonderful to see.
What's your goal? What do you want to see happen in the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years in the area?
Well, my own bias is to see the Wilson Island preserved. And I guess more than that, I would really want to see Fresno take an interest in preserving pieces of its past.
So that's like the big picture.
That's the big picture,
and
yeah.
then the more narrower focus is this neighborhood, which, by the way, I've been to. I was years and years ago when I worked for the city, and there were the tower cleanups. Miss Gay Amend did a wonderful job coordinating those. And then I didn't realize what the name of her neighborhood was, but I knew that there were these beautiful, well-preserved homes. And then when I talked to you, I realized, I think that's Wilson Island right there, so it makes sense. Let's talk about safety a little bit of the neighborhood, because you know, in Fresno, we have some terrible misconceptions that anything south of Shotwell, actually now anything south of Herndon is a bad area, and then anything around the Tower District is a bad area. These are misconceptions, I know, because I live south of Shaw and I live in West Fresno and I love my street. Talk about the safety in your area. It seems like everybody knows each other, which helps you figure out who should be in the neighborhood and who shouldn't. But you tell us a little bit about that.
I feel perfectly safe in my neighborhood. Do I assume there's no risks? No. I think anybody today just needs to be aware of their surroundings. Things happen. What we do have in the neighborhood, though, is a very active communication network. So if any of us see anything odd or experience untoward events, that goes out on our network and people are watching. Is it crime-free? No. I don't think there's any place in Fresno that's crime-free.
That's what I was going to say. There are, you can pick the greatest area of town, and I don't think that it's crime-free.
Yeah. But I think having the neighborhood network and sharing what we see and being vigilant helps.
You seem to me like a person that's always been active. You know, you're a professor at Fresno State. You talked about a certain area that you wanted to bring a statue to. There are people listening to this interview now who like their neighborhood. They don't want to move it from their neighborhood, but want advice on how to bring people together. How did you do it? Or how did that work for the Wilson Island historical area?
It started before I got there. So I'm reflecting on what keeps us together. Getting to know people around you is probably essential. I would even delete the word probably. It is essential to get to know the people around you and find out where you share common interests. Finding out what people are interested in and pursuing those interests is the beginning.
So we have a few more minutes to chat here on the program. Let's go back and talk about the activities for the Centennial, this group. What's going on and how can people find out more information about those?
The biggest event for us as the planning committee is this event in May. So May 18th, Saturday, 10 to noon at Fresno High. Learn more about both the social history and the architecture of the Wilson Island and walk around. There'll be undoubtedly some of the homeowners out and about. Before that, April 27th is a Saturday as well. Another one of my interests is gardening, and I'm a certified master gardener now, thanks to the Fresno UC program, which I heartily endorse. They have a spring garden tour every year, and this year they're featuring 3 of the homes in the Wilson Island. So if you're interested in gardens around historic homes, April 27th would be a date to mark on your calendar. That, I think, 10 to 5, I believe. I have a website, JeannineRaymond.com, and those events are on that website if you need a reminder. I also post stories once a month this year about the homes, if you want to learn more about
on your website?
I just posted the March story this weekend.
As you're talking, I love that you have the story behind some of these homes. So in the Wilson Island Historical District, if I pointed out a house, would the history of that house be available to me? I mean, how would I find the history of the house? I mean, it sounds like you know it because you've researched it, but is the history readily available?
The short answer is only if I've posted it on my website. So the longer answer is I'm trying to make those histories available because I find them fascinating. I find the stories about the people who created Fresno, who built their homes here, is a wonderful entree to Fresno's history, and I want other people to have access to it. And so if there's a particular home that you're interested in, you can let me know, and I'll put that on my agenda to write that story. But yeah, there's no single place to go right now other than that website.
I can just imagine going into one of these homes, stopping, pausing, looking around and envisioning stuff that was happening 80, 90, 100 years ago. You've done it. How does that make you feel? How did it make you feel the first time you walked into your home and you looked around at the history?
The first feeling I had was about the craftsman that created the home, the structure. I will be one of the first ones to complain about the elimination of the skilled trades in our schools. The work that's on display in these homes is just beautiful. And in some cases, it's dying art, which is sad. So that was a first feeling. And then there was a deep curiosity about my home. It came with the story that, your home is connected to the mafia and Bugsy Siegel. Really?
What a great history. I mean,
yeah.
The fact that the home kind of tells a story is amazing to me.
That one turned out not to be true.
Oh, okay.
There was a Siegel living there, and it was in the 40s. There might have been a connection with bootlegging. That story is on my website. But yeah, the stories about them, what they look like, the piece of history that they exemplify, how life was different. So here's something to imagine the next time you're in this neighborhood. In that era, people walked downtown from that neighborhood.
From that neighborhood to downtown? How interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
That, talk about getting your steps in.
Yeah, yeah.
What a perfect way to end today's program. We can go on and talk about these homes. We'll have you back when your book comes out. And then we'll have the April and May events on our calendar so that we can come out and learn a little bit more about this neighborhood and gardening on one of the days. Jeannine, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and we hope to see you at the neighborhood.
Will do. I will definitely drive by there.
Okay.
Thank you to the audience members listening to this broadcast on KFSR 90.7 FM and to those watching on CMAC, Comcast 93, and AT&T 99. Our guest has been Jeannine Raymond. She's got a book coming out, and she's very proud and speaks highly of her neighborhood, the Wilson Island Historical District, an area, several blocks of beautiful homes and a lot of Fresno's history. Thank you to our volunteers that make this production and every production possible. Paul Starcevic was our director today. Xavier, our associate producer as well. Hope you learned something today about history of Fresno. We hope you enjoyed the program. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For a complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.